Okay, we're moving forward, and we actually have two sessions, one starting on maker stage and the other one starting on the builder page led by Tim. On the maker page, we have a no-code legend. Anyone who was hanging out long enough on Bubble forums for sure knows Peter Amlie. Peter is famous for his thorough analysis of his own work and for being able to clearly summarize the wisdom of the community and share it with anyone in a very presentable and transparent format. We'll be talking with Peter about how do you actually plan building a no-code application? What are the caveats? What you should be starting with? How do you build an application that can actually scale? And what to keep in mind to make sure that your application can grow, progress, and have more features added to it in a nice and easy way. And Peter definitely has a lot of experience with it. He has been sharing it a lot with Bubble community up until now, and today he's going to be sharing this outlook and this mindset with us on the maker stage. Tim, what's going on with you?
Yeah, so we have a really exciting panel coming up on the builder stage. We have a panel discussion led by some more leaders in the no-code community, hosted by Lacey Kessler, who is the founder of Women in No Code, an organization dedicated to providing resources, tutorials, and a community to women in no code. Lacey will be discussing with Samantha from Metronax, Sarah Du from Alloy Allocation, and Miriam Hokabian from Softer to discuss the obstacles that they have faced during their careers, why no-code can help lower the barriers, and their views on the no-code community as a whole. It should be really exciting.
Amazing. So the panel discussion is going to be happening on the builder stage. And we're going to be talking to Peter on the maker stage. Guys, thank you very much. Peter, we are continuing on the maker stage with your session. Welcome. It feels great to be talking to you again.
First of all, thanks for the kind introduction. It's a lot to live up to, as Levon also said. So thank you for that. Quick thank you also to Zeroqode for making this conference happen. I think it's, as someone else said, I can't remember who said that, but it's an important step, I think, for the no-code community. And I wanted to just take the opportunity here to quickly thank that community as well, because over the 4 or 5 years that I've been using no-code products, I think one of the most pleasant things about it has really been this great community that has grown around it, which isn't given when a new technology pops up. So thank you to everyone, and I'm really looking forward to this. There we go. So my name is Petter. That's a Norwegian version of Peter. I live and work in Dubai, where I run this company called Amlie Solutions, which has been around on and off for around 15 years now. So I'm really a tech guy by heart, but it's really in the last 4 or 5 years that I've switched over to, from analytics and marketing and all that stuff and kind of digital strategy over to more of a software development side, and then especially through no-code products. And I'm really excited about no-code because, as Emmanuel said earlier today, and I can really emphasize that point, is that small and medium businesses have, they have the chance with these no-code products to really build software that's customized for them. So for me, no-code is not just about startups. It's also about, helping already existing businesses leverage technology in order to become more efficient and to increase their sales, and also to gather data and use data in their day-to-day business. So I'm thinking, let's just get this title out of the way first. So the title of this talk is A Complete Guide for Planning and Building Your No-Code App. That sounds pretty heavy, and it sounds pretty professional. It makes me sound pretty smart, but I can assure you this professional-looking slide here is the most professional you will see from me today. It'll all go downhill from here, I can assure you that. So what this talk is all about really is that mistakes happen, right? They happen all the time, and they happen, no matter what your experience level is. But the mistakes that I hope that I can address a little bit today are the ones that you don't know that you're making, basically. Which is often a lack of experience or a lack of technical expertise in the product that you're using. And this all started out with a good friend of mine, whom I talked to a few weeks back. Several of you will know him. He asked me if I wanted to speak at this conference, and the conversation went something like this. And it made me think, how can I take all the mistakes that I've made over now 5 years and compress them into a 20-minute talk? So the way I wanted to approach this was to kind of see, not to address every single problem that I had or challenge that I met, but really to see how has my philosophy changed, and what is the pattern that I'm working in to try and avoid these mistakes in the future. And I wanted to just, show this illustrated really in one way here first. And it's that most people who go into building some kind of product with no code, they're not doing it just for fun. It's usually a part of a startup idea or some kind of business plan that you have, which means that any mistake that you made can be pretty costly. And I've set this up with a kind of extreme example here. So let's say you're building an app and you have a 6-month development period for that app. And after 3 months, you hit a brick wall, right? And that brick wall is that you suddenly see that the platform that you chose for your application can't really support your project. So you basically discover that all the work that you did for 3 months was wasted. It felt productive, it felt like you were doing something, but you didn't really. And to put it bluntly, you could have been doing this for 3 months and the result would have been exactly the same. You're still without an application, right? And just before I go into it too much, Levon also told me, please make this talk bubble agnostic. No code platform agnostic. My tool of choice is Bubble. So I'll say that right off the bat, but I've tried to set up this talk so that you can still get something out of it, even if you don't use Bubble. So I'm hoping that even if I use examples from one platform, that you can see that there's kind of an underlying philosophy here that may help you out in other platforms as well. So one sentence that I really want to get across in this presentation is, the one that I want you to remember is that building is quick and changing is slow. I really want you to take this to your heart and remember it. Building is quick and changing is slow. And what I mean by this is that to create an application in a no-code platform can often be a very quick process, because you have this beautiful blank white canvas and you can place whatever you like on it. All the elements in the world, you can place them, you can resize them, and you can do whatever you want with them. But the minute that you need to change something in an app that's already been built, it's probably a lot more difficult. It suddenly becomes a lot more time consuming. And I don't think I'm exaggerating if I say that if you spend 1 hour building something and you want to change something after the fact, you're going to spend 3 hours changing it. So what can we do about this? Well, there's really just 2 things you can do. One thing is to make sure that you build it right the first time, so that you don't make any mistakes. But as we all know, that only goes so far, because we're all going to make some mistakes and unexpected things will come up, especially if you're working with clients and stuff. So the next best thing we can do is to make sure that your app is set up in a way that makes it easier for you to go back and change something when you have to. So these are the 2 points that I'm going to be focusing on today. And these are also the 2 points that I really want you to take back with you and remember when you start to build your own app. So the first step of any process is to pick the right tool for the job. And Levon had a great presentation about this earlier. I'm not going to go into any specific platforms for this. What I am going to do is to give you some advice on how you can, how you can make a decision on this, basically. So the first thing you have to do before you pick a platform is to know what your app is supposed to do. And it's strange to see sometimes that people ask questions on different forums and stuff, and they're not really specific. They don't really know, they don't really explain what it is they're trying to build. And a typical question is the first point on this slide here: can I scale on this platform? That is one of the questions that I see the most. Should I pick platform? Can I scale on it? And I have to just be blunt that this question doesn't really make any sense, because it completely depends on how you set up your app. So if you have an application that only runs client-side actions, you could have 1 billion users and you won't even see it on the performance charts. But if you have one action in your app that runs a script on 10,000 different database entries, you can easily crash your app with just one user. So it doesn't really make sense to ask, will it scale? Because it completely depends on what you're building. And the thing here is, I've set up two examples here to serve, kind of as a template for how you can ask these questions. So I have an example 1 and an example 2. The first app here is a typical e-commerce product where you need to be able to search for products. So you have a database of different products, and you need to have some sort of shopping cart functionality. You may depend on great SEO performance, and you want it to connect to Google Data Studio because you want reports and you need all this stuff. And it has to serve about 5,000 clients per day. That's what you predict that you're going to get. And the second app here is an idea for a two-way 4K video streaming platform where you use the device webcam or device camera. You need push notifications, you need screen recording, you need to be able to send sound files and play them back, and you need some kind of chat solution. So both of these are perfectly good ideas. They can probably be built on one or more no-code platforms, but you can see that asking questions about which platform to use, you have to be very specific because these two will give you widely different answers, right? So I really recommend noting down every point that you need to think about for your app. What does it need? If it needs great SEO performance, you can't find out that your platform doesn't support SEO 3 months into your work. You need to know that before you begin. And it helps to actually kind of play dumb. Pretend that you don't know anything about these platforms and you don't know anything about technology, because people, when they see that you have kind of a lack of experience, they are just ridiculously helpful. You're going to experience this, that if you ask great questions, you're going to get great answers. And people will go out of their way to really explain things to you. And this may bring you some new perspectives that you haven't thought about. So I really be specific, ask questions from people who have used these platforms for a long time, and spend that time before you pick a platform. And okay, so let's move on. This is a kind of blunt advice that especially the beginners, I wanted to take this in. And it's that your first application is probably gonna suck. And I'm gonna use a simple metaphor here just to explain what I mean by this. So imagine that you've never heard about cars. You don't know what a car is. No one has told you about cars, and you've never seen a car. But you have been told one thing is that it's an invention that will take you from point A to point B if you operate it in the right way. And you get into the car, and you can probably drive it from New York to Los Angeles, all in the first gear. And this is kind of the same thing as building your first mobile application, is that the car will move. It will get you from point A to point B, but driving it all that way in the first gear is probably not the best way to do it, right? So your first application is going to do exactly what you tell it to do, but you're going to be driving it around like this, right? The car will move, but there are better ways to do it. So don't spend your kids' college fund on your first application, because you have to consider that this is just a stepping stone or a learning opportunity. And then maybe your second or third app will improve as you've learned this platform, because the learning curve is a lot lower than code. But it doesn't mean that you can build a great app on your first attempt. You will have to learn something along the way. Okay, moving on. You've chosen your platform, and it's time to start planning your app. And this is not an exhaustive list. This is meant as an example. But these are the kinds of questions that you need to ask yourself before you start doing anything on screen, right? So, if you need let's say you're building a CRM, what kind of database do you need? What kind of fields do you need for each user and for each type of data that you're saving in this database? How can you connect them efficiently and stuff like that? Do you want an app that's mobile friendly? Do you want a one-page app or multi-page app? And how does the navigation look? All of these things are decisions that you should make before you start building your app. Because again, if you build an app and you change your mind about something, or you suddenly think about something that you should have thought of before, it can take a long time to go back and change something. So all of this, the idea here is to really save time later on. The first step I go through usually when I want to build an app, maybe because I have a kind of designer background, is that I really want to find a specific style for my application. And again, this is not just about looking good, although it's really my philosophy that an app with great user interface and great design will perform better. People will like using it more. And if you build an internal tool for a company, you will have a lot more buy-in from the users if you have an app that's easy to use and looks good and all that stuff. And I use almost only this page, dribble.com with 3 B's. You have, I'm an okay designer, but I'm not a great designer. On this site, you have some really, really phenomenal designers. And even if you are a good designer, go in here to get some inspiration, pick some elements that you really like, learn to put colors together and stuff like that to build a good looking app. This is really a great starting point. And the second resource that I'm listing here, freepik.com, many of you will know this already. This is basically a stock site, but they have a yearly price instead of the expensive iStock price. And they really specialize in a lot of vector illustrations, which can be really great to fill up some of those empty spaces in your app. So I really recommend these 2 resources for finding your style in this app. So for the next point, this one is really back to basics. I'm not a huge fan of project management tools. I know that sometimes they're necessary, especially if you're working in teams. They can be really helpful. And if you need to report to your clients, stuff like that. I'm not saying never use a project management tool. Sometimes you have to. But this is my favorite project management tool. It's just a rollable whiteboard that you can get on Amazon for like $5. I've had like 10 of these. They wear out over time. There's just something about being able to note down something, draw something, and just wiping it out and never thinking about it again. It's just the best feeling in the world, I think. It's extremely helpful. You're gonna love it. And if you make a small change in your app that you need to change back before you deploy your app, you just write it down, remove it 5 minutes after. Just trust me, just get one of these. You're not gonna regret it, I promise you. The next step when I go into building an app is just to do what I call to clear your desk, which is basically delete everything that is pre-made in your app. Because they often call a lot of pre-made CSS style, stuff like that, a lot of pre-made pages, examples, stuff like that. Just get rid of everything. If you have a list of 30 styles that you're not going to use, delete every one of them so that when you start building your own styles and you start building your own elements, your app is not cluttered with a bunch of different things that you're not going to use, because they will slow you down and make everything a lot more messy over time. So start with a clean canvas. I think that's just a lot better way to do it. Next, think responsibly. This, of course, has to do with how your app will react when you resize the screen. For some applications, your app will not react at all. You just want a static view. Other apps, you want to really resize with the screen all the way down to a mobile size. And if you don't plan for this, it's going to be a nightmare to go down and fix it later. So you really want to think about how your app is going to behave on different screen sizes. So if you design a page full screen and then think about going mobile, it's going to be a big change. You're going to spend a lot of time doing that, and you want to avoid that. So think about this before you start designing. Next, this is a huge tip. This was one of my main discoveries in becoming an efficient developer. Again, this is a Bubble-specific tip, but it applies to any platform. So you can see these settings here. These are, as I said, from Bubble. So this is about showing a grid that you're working on while you design your page. I always go for a grid that's 25 times 25 pixels. And the reason I do that is that it's so easy to calculate any change, because it's 25, 50, 75, 100, right? So you can always easily in your head calculate the distance between elements and stuff like that. I always check that it snaps into the grid, so that when you use your mouse, the elements will automatically snap to the grid. So that helps you design your pages really quickly. And the result you can see here. Here I have a simple form where you can enter some personal information for a user. And as you can see here, this will always be 50 pixels from the edge of the screen. The input field will always be 250 pixels wide. The distance between them will always be 25 pixels. And you see, if you set this up from the beginning, the app is really going to design itself. You only have to think about these things once, because everything else is just going to fall into place automatically as you go along. So this tips, while it may look a little bit boring to set this up, it takes 5 minutes and it's going to save you tremendous amounts of time. The next step I go through is to set up the styles that I'll be working with. And again, I will just set up a completely blank page that my users will never see. So in Bubble, you can set it up inside a reusable element, for example, to keep it hidden from users. And what I will do is that I will use all that information I found in Dribbble earlier, all that inspirational stuff with all the images, and I will design my own elements. So this is from an app I'm currently working on. I know that I will have certain buttons. I know that I will have certain inputs. I know that I will have pop-ups, stuff like that. I design all of these elements before I have made anything else in my app. And again, this is about saving time, and it's about creating consistency in your design so that your users can recognize your specific style. And by building this and by setting this spacing that we did in the last step, again, your app will basically design itself. You can just copy paste this in wherever you need it. Next, for planning, what a form may look like, I go back to the whiteboard. I draw everything out, exactly what I want it to look like. And if I make a mistake, I wipe it out and I draw it again. Instead of going back and changing something on screen, which takes a lot of time, I can just make decisions on the spot while I look at this drawing. These tabs here are a great example, actually, because they look great. They're a great solution. But what happens if I go mobile? Will those tabs still work? I'm not sure. Maybe it's not such a good idea. So maybe I want to change that. And as long as you can see these problems on this whiteboard before you design them, you can save a lot of time just wiping it out and creating it again from scratch. Next, you need to think about how your app will scale, because I've seen this from a lot of users that their app is performing really well. But the minute they add just 8 more users, the app suddenly becomes really slow. If your app becomes slow with 8 users, it probably hasn't been designed in a great way, right? So because this is not the fault of the platform, and it means that you have to design it in some other way. And at some point, you may add 100 more users, and it's going to slow down even more. And if this problem hits you when the users are already in the system, you have a huge challenge, right? Because you have to, in a panic, go back and change all this stuff to make it more efficient. So you really need to think about how your app will scale. And I'll show you an example here to just, again, this is about Bubble, but it's really platform agnostic. It's about server processing load in general. And it'll show you how much extra work you can give your server without really thinking about it. So let's say you're building an HR system, and you're going to show on the screen a list of employees. So we have Amlie solutions here, and we have a list of employees. And you see on the bottom here that we have a list of 100 employees in total. So this is one search, right? You're performing one search for people in the organization Amlie solutions, one search. But let's now say that you just want to add one more element. And these 100 employees, they happen to be middle managers. And you want to show all their team members as well. So just by adding one more element here, we can see still it's Amlie Solutions is the company. You have all of these middle managers, and you can see their team members underneath here. So you've added just one more element, and it makes sense that you probably maybe even double the processing load, right? Which is a big deal. But that's not actually what you've done here. Actually, you've added 101 searches to your page just by adding this one extra element, because it has to perform one search to find all these users, and then it has to perform one search on each of these lines to search for the team members. So what you've really done here is just by adding a single extra element, you have increased your server load by 10,000%, which is a big deal, right? And imagine now that you bring 100 users into your site all at once. You're basically asking the server to perform 10,100 searches all at the same time. Now, this is kind of an extreme example. The searches are more efficient than this. But it just goes to show us an example that is very easy to spiral your server load completely out of control if you don't plan for it correctly. And when you start using huge commercial apps, you will notice that, for example, Gmail, they have all the resources in the world. they will still show you only 25 mails, and they will need a few seconds to load the screen. So every app does this. You need to find ways to hide information until it's needed. Don't perform searches that you don't absolutely need to do, stuff like that, to make sure that your app performs as you scale. Another tip here is to leave space for changes. And this is also very bubble centric, but it's really more of a philosophy in how you work. In this case, I've set up a collection group underneath a form here. And the reason I'm bringing this is that users will never see this group. I colored it red to be easy to see here, but this is just collapsed down to 0 pixels height whenever user goes into the app. And this group is actually 5,000 pixels high. And the reason we have this here is to make sure that if I need to change something in this form after the app is finished, I won't have to move around 200 elements to make space for another input field. I can just resize this 5,000 pixel group, and I have all the space that I need, basically. And I've had groups that are 20,000 pixels high, just to make sure that any change that I want to make in the future, I can make without spending 2 hours doing it. So this can really save you enormous amounts of time just by doing this. Okay, my last tip here, as we're reaching the end, is that the best product is the one that ships. There is something about these no-code platforms where, making some changes and adding some new features is so easy. It's so tempting to just keep improving it. And, you made a mistake 3 months ago. You want to go back and make it a bit more efficient, a bit better. Keep in mind that you need to ship this product at some time. Stick to your deadlines and add stuff later, because you want to get users in, you want to get feedback, and you really want to to get it out in the live world before spending 5 months just adding features. But I can guarantee you, I can talk from experience here, you can easily spend a year working on one application without releasing it, just because you want to make it a little better and a little better. So that is the end of my presentation. I really hope you got something out of it, and I'm ready for some questions if you have some.
Okay, Peter, thank you so much. You're putting me in a very difficult position. You were so thorough and so detailed in your speech that you're making it very difficult for me to do my job. Basically, you've answered all my questions and then a few more. And then I feel like the people got like 200%, or as you said, 10,000% more out of what you have explained that they were hoping for. I guess that the only really valuable thing that people can take away from this conversation is, for people who were not taking notes like me, how can they get a summary of it, or like a bit of it, of what you were sharing, of what you were coming across, and how do people learn this thing without having to experience this on their own at all times, at least? I mean, where do you get more of that? Is that written down somewhere? Please share it.
Yes, so I have written some lengthy posts on the Bubble forum, so you're welcome to check those out. You can search for my username, which is PETTER with 2 T's, Peter with 2 T's, basically. Some of this stuff is mentioned there, and I'm also available for anyone who wants to ask me some questions publicly or in a private message. And as I said, really the 2 main points that I want to get across here in this presentation is basically to try and plan your app in a way that makes you avoid making mistakes, and also to do everything that you can to make mistakes easy to correct. That's basically the main points that I'm trying to get across. So I did mention some examples, but if you keep those 2 in mind, I think you can really make out some great tools for yourself that I haven't thought of, and I would love to see you share them on these different forums as well.
Amazing. Peter Amlie from Amlie Solutions, that has been a gem of a speech. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you so much.